My presence as an author and president of Spelman College, the oldest continuing historically Black college for women, also located in Atlanta, reinforced that visibility and that tradition of educational excellence. Although the program was focused on the Black experience, affirming identity, a multi-ethnic, multiracial planning committee had worked together on the program, building community. Seated on the stage with me and the principal were the student leaders of this planning group, young men and women of all racial backgrounds, and all played a role in the program, whether introducing a speaker, reciting a poem, or giving a musical performance. The assembly began with a parade of flags representing the countries of origin of every student in the school, and with greetings in every language spoken in the school. Affirming identity, everybody could see themselves in that picture. Throughout the assembly, it was obvious that attention had been paid to creating a program that affirmed and highlighted the history of one historically marginalized group, but simultaneously reinforced the goal of building one cohesive school community. But the assembly also illustrated the third of my ABCs, cultivating leadership, because inclusive leadership takes practice. The young students who worked together to create this multicultural celebration of Black History Month were given a valuable opportunity to gain that kind of practice. They surely learned valuable leadership lessons in the process. We all need this kind of learning opportunities in our organizations, and we cannot assume that our employees have had them. A few years ago, I had a dream that illuminated for me the difficulty of the task we are undertaking. In that dream, I was driving a car along a road. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Highway 1 in California, which runs along the coast, and it's very beautiful but rocky. And you often see signs that say, "Watch out for rock slides," as you're driving along. And so I was driving on a road like that in my dream, and all of a sudden the car went off the road and was on top of a pile of rocks. And in my dream, I said in surprise, "What happened to the road?" And a voice answered, "There is no road." When I awakened, it occurred to me that my dream held the perfect metaphor for what we as a society are trying to do. Many of us have a vision of where we would like to be, a vision of schools where all students have the opportunity and the encouragement to achieve at a high standard, a society made up of multi-ethnic organizations and communities characterized by equitable and just group relations, rather than the presently deeply ingrained power hierarchies that still systematically give advantages to some people and not others. For me, as an educator, it is a vision of education that should provide all students the skills and experience necessary for effective participation in a diverse society. It is a vision of society that might lead to what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. But as an educator, I know that such an ideal educational environment has never existed on a broad scale in American society, or to my knowledge, anywhere else. There is no road, but the vision is a blueprint. The election of Barack Obama lets us know that the construction of the road is underway. Some of us did not imagine that it was going to happen because of our knowledge of the history of race relations in our society. And many people talked about the effect of people saying one thing and doing something else in the privacy of the voting booth. But yet it did. The construction of the road is underway. It may not be finished, but the foundation has been laid. Something new has been born. It is up to all of us to keep this construction project going. But there's much more that could be said about race relations in the age of Obama, and I'm aware that my time is coming to an end. But this is what I want to lift up before closing, and that is I want to lift up and underscore the notion of anxiety about a changing paradigm and the psychological response to it. Because it's not just the reality that a Black man can be president that is threatening the status quo. It is the collapse of the American economy that we experienced in the fall of 2008. and the financial threat that many are still experiencing. It is the ruptured sense of security brought on by 9/11 and other terrorist attacks on American soil. And it is the slow recognition that the United States might not always be number one in the world. Each of these statements represents a challenge to a set of deeply held assumptions, held by many in our nation. And anxiety and fear often result. Psychological threat. I am a psychologist, and psychological threat is a real concept that people experience when their fundamental assumptions are challenged. And how do we deal with fear? This is an important point I hope you will all take away. As human beings, like other animals, typically we deal with fear in one of two ways. We either withdraw or attack. In the current climate of incivility in our nation, we see evidence of both patterns. The withdrawal takes the form of circling the wagons, pulling in and pulling away from those we feel threatened by. When we are afraid, we quickly begin to categorize who is for me, who is against me. We start to think and act in terms of us and them. We have a long history of us and them thinking in our society, and it gets aggravated when people feel threatened. We withdraw into our circles of safety, and we attack those we believe are outside that circle and who pose a threat. I believe that is what we see in Arizona with the new laws against immigrants. It is what we saw in the example of the student at the University of Texas. He sent out his message to those he saw aligned with him, and he said, "Gather up. There is an N in the White House. Gather up. We have to protect ourselves against them." Outside the political arena, when we read about cases of bullying in schools, the bullied typically has been defined by the bullies as one of them, defined as deviant in some way. We don't know exactly what the social anxiety is that drives the behavior of the bullies, but my guess is it wouldn't be hard to find if we investigated through interviews. We see more and more examples every day of people out of control. YouTube videos of teens fighting literally to the death, rude and unruly behavior in the real lives of reality television and on the nightly news. You may say, what does this have to do with race? Perhaps not anything specifically. But what is the daily lesson? The daily lesson is this, that living in a time of rapid social change, driven in part by rapid changes in technology, a time when many feel they are not standing on solid rock but on shifting sand, the question is, how am I supposed to manage my anxiety and my fear? By lashing out? Certainly that response grows more common because our society seems to have given us permission to do so. And it represents, I think, a dangerous moment in our nation, particularly when the rhetoric of many people in our society is so polarizing. Many of you are parents, or if you're not parents yourselves, you have experience with small children. And what do frustrated babies do? They scream and hit. With good guidance from adults, they eventually learn self-control. They learn to regulate that behavior if that is what the environment demands from them. It is not that different with us as adults. Leadership matters. The expectations of the leaders can change the tone of the community, the tone of the conversation. Fundamentally, we know that human beings are not that different from other social animals. Not unlike wolves or dogs, we follow the leader. Yes, we have a tendency to circle the wagons, to categorize us and them, but we look to the leader to help us know who the us is and who the them is. The leader can define who's in and who's out. The leader can draw the circle narrowly or widely. When the leader draws the circle in an exclusionary way, with the rhetoric of hostility and fear, the sense of threat among the followers is heightened. When the rhetoric is expansive and inclusionary, the threat is reduced.